What's going on, Maddie? What's up, Alex? Evening, everyone. Evening. What's going on, Roger? By the way, someone can just give me the all clear. Mic test, mic test. Make sure we got no robot. I feel you on that, Roger. What's going on, AA? No robot. Appreciate that, Tariq. What's going on? What's up, Sids? Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Today was pretty brutal, guys. Uh, I don't think anyone really expected that kind of slaughtering per se. Master Wu. What's going on? Welcome in, everyone. Welcome in. Today was a pretty brutal day. Unless your name was Mr. Master Wu over here, shorting Apple right off the get-go. Today was a pretty brutal day. I did think I was gonna change up today's daily recap. Especially with the volatility that we had today, with all the events that's gonna go on this week. What I kind of want to turn the attention to, so that way you're not pretty much just jumping into trades just blindly, basically, and you're not necessarily chasing at the same time. So, pretty much using the alerts to the best of our abilities. And here in TFC, what up, Tatum? And that's what I'm kind of going to guide you into on the daily recap today, and some of the ones that I actually already executed pretty perfectly. And that's what will be my primary focus, because I can go through a lot of support levels, resistance levels, and by morning, who knows, with the volatility that we have, we might even blow through all of those. So I think the most important thing right now is actually, pretty much just giving you a rundown on the alerts that actually hit, what you may want to pay attention to, that may trigger going into tomorrow, and actually ones that are actually still active right now. But nonetheless, I'll just give you a quick rundown on what I'm seeing right now. Yeah, Matthew, I am looking at that game. The Rams and Cardinals playing really good game tonight. But just a quick rundown on futures, what I'm looking at. It looks like a bit of a narrow range right now that we are heading into the Feds. As you see, I did have that massive broadening wedge that we had that was ascending. Then we ended up with one that was ascending as we ended up breaking down. And now retesting the resistance of that massive ascending broadening wedge that we had. And so we're pretty much just within what I would call a little megaphone action here, between that green support line and that white resistance line of that massive megaphone. We're pretty much just in a megaphone just going sideways, in which I would expect to have support hold here right around 46.50. If that can hold, then that would create our next leg going right into the Feds if the market wants to go ahead and give us a little bit of a pump before whether we get good news and the rally starts, or we end up just pretty much flushing. So it's just within a range here. As you see, I'm looking as far as resistance that I have would take us up to about anywhere between 47.40 to 47.43. Otherwise, if we end up breaking below support here, ballpark number range, I would say below 46.45 on S&P Futes, then it's likely going to see that we're going to break down. I have a little bit of a key support level here right around 46.25. And then I do have a range here, which was a prior resistance support range, and that ends up breaking down below 45.96. So that's gonna get a little bit brutal if we end up breaking below this megaphone. You know, the Santa rally that we're all anticipating, it's likely gonna be postponed at least until next week if we end up breaking down on the megaphone. If we end up pushing, then I think everyone's gonna be happy. All the calls are gonna be paying. Similar to S&P there, Nasdaq almost in the same little bit of a range here as well. As you see, we had the descending broadening wedge, and we pretty much got a flat top here on Nasdaq, in which we weren't able to break out of. We wicked out of it, but we weren't able to make a breakout. We retested it multiple times. We just weren't able to get a clean breakout, and we ended up retesting that descending broadening wedge. So we're looking to hold support. This is pretty much key support level for me right now, off of that resistance of the broadening wedge that we had before. Now it's acting as support. As you see, we already hit that support once here back on the 10th, and now we're right back at the support. So I would expect this to hold right now. If this support doesn't hold, then that's going to be a major downfall that we're looking into. Next resistance support level that I had from prior was going down below 16,035. And then if we end up breaking below the bottom end of that zone, which will be around 16,988, then it's likely going to get pretty bloody. And then we're gonna see Master Wu all over live saying he's in some kind of short, and likely it's gonna be Apple or something. All right. So tight range right now. Let's see if we end up getting the bounce. As you see in the megaphone, you're at support on S&P Futes. Same thing here as Nasdaq. You're pretty much at support here. So I would expect this little bit of a overnight pump. Probably give a little bit of a sideways action, and then we'll pick a direction if the market wants to pump going into the Feds, or if we end up retracing right back to support. But I do expect a little bit of a gap up, and then we'll be right in the middle of that megaphone action right now. Tatum knows what I'm talking about. We know that Master Wu is going to be in puts. If the market starts bleeding tomorrow morning, that's it. It's a wrap. Literally, whenever Master Wu is actually on live, I think the market just goes straight down. I think it's literally a proven theory. But moving on real quick, as I actually point out, just three tickers as far as what I'm personally watching. I know we're all watching Qualcomm this morning. I know that Avery was all over it. This was one of the newsletter plays. It wasn't too hot, but of course, given market conditions, it was a little bit of expected. We were able to make new highs though, so that was a good thing. 191.30. That's actually what our newsletter alert. Well, not the newsletter alert, but the newsletter play was actually anticipating us to make a new high. It's just that we weren't able to get any kind of follow through off of breaking that new high. So I'm looking for 181 to hold. If we can hold 181, then we're likely going into gap fill here, and that's going to be below 178.50. So I just want to give an update on that. I know the alert went off this morning after at the opening bell. So if we're able to hold 181 tomorrow, then that'll likely see us a nice little continuation and hopefully retest this high, and we'll get a better continuation. Likely test 185, and then 187.50 was my next support level, my next resistance. So those are the two levels I'm watching, but the gap fill is a little bit scary considering the action that we had today, the volatility. So just keep that in mind. Below 178.50, you have that gap fill. But ideally, I want to see 181 hold. If that doesn't hold, then yeah, I'm likely expecting us to test that gap fill, and then of course enter it. So I'll watch that one. I'll keep an eye on it. There was also Amazon. I am still watching this one. A little bit more so because of the particular pattern that we're in. We've seen Amazon pretty much fail head and shoulders endlessly for pretty much this entire sideways action that we've had since like July of 2020. But what's interesting here, and this is where the Santa rally kind of comes into play here, if tech ends up having any momentum going into the end of the year, I'm actually watching because if you see this little left shoulder right here, you actually see that you have a little bit of a double curve right here, in which this middle peak right here does not actually reach the neckline. I'm actually anticipating that same thing to happen right here. As you see, this could end up potentially being our short-term bottom right here, in which we end up getting a V-shaped recovery back to maybe the peak, I want to say, of this high. My resistance was 35.60 overall. If we get any kind of momentum building within the next few days. But I just wanted to point that out. As you see in the middle here, you had a bit of a little bottoming formation, but not to the neckline. So it actually validated that left shoulder. I'm looking for this V shape right back to the top, in which will likely top off around 35.60 and then retest the neckline at some point in time once our volatility comes back. That's what I would anticipate. Otherwise, of course, if volatility continues tomorrow, we go right down to the neckline, then obviously then we're looking more so at breaking the neckline. So you know that there will be more downside. But I'm watching for a reversal. The gap of tomorrow morning will really be key, the continuation on that. So I'll keep an eye, but 35.60 was my overall target on this one. If we're able to get that V-shaped recovery right here, to just take it straight north. So I'll keep an eye on that one. Of course, I'll give you an update on live tomorrow morning on that. But just so you're aware, in case you're not there on live to hear us really talk about it. The other one was Tesla, and I'll pretty much give you a little bit of a gist of a story here. This was actually going to be on the newsletter from my end. I was actually going to have the newsletter play be a lotto play. And so the fact that I actually had a lotto play going for the downside, going into the gap fill, it was a 90-40, 90-20 put debit spread I was going to do. And it was going to cost about $210 for a max profit of about $1,700. Then I ended up seeing Avery's play that he has for a reversal, and I'm like, I mean, I could see it working out. So benefit of the doubt, it's always bull market, it's always stonks. I let him have the way with that one. Turns out I was right so far. So it is playing out to what I anticipated, and you've probably seen me chart stocks like this, at request pretty much over nights and nights. And whenever I see a defined downtrend, which you actually have a defined downtrend resistance, and you have an immediate gap fill right below, it's more than likely that you're filling that gap fill below. You see, probably seen me touch bases with that, looking at Neo, looking at Moderna, looking at also Baba, and you see me pretty much just say, look, there's a defined downtrend and there's a gap fill immediate below. And that's basically the same exact thought that I had with Tesla when I was bearish at it looking at this past weekend. And I should have shorted it. By the time that I actually looked at it this morning, it was already down too much for me. And I didn't want to chase it. But I do expect us to fill this gap, just a heads up. But once we get below 94, 944.20, then it's pretty much a straight right down to like about 910. So that'll be a beautiful one. I will be there for that move. I'll likely set an alert by morning. But below that 94, 94.40, 944, then we're watching for that gap fill, and I'll be there for that one. All right. So heads up on that one. And then the three other tickets I just wanted to point out to you guys really quickly was pretty much the unusual flow that we were having. And that's what I really wanted to point out to you guys. And where is. Okay, there we go. What I actually wanted to point out was the unusual flow that we had. And this is where it comes into pretty much what I want you guys to focus on, especially if volatility continues to pretty much press on the pedal here and we continue to nosedive. This is really what you want to watch. And if you actually see this play that we had on SE, unusual puts, this came in on the 8th. So that was pretty much right at the top here. I want to say right around 361 was when this actually came out. Wait, take that back. I'm looking at October. This was right around 265 is when this actually triggered. So the 265, and they actually got 245 puts. I ended up taking this one as well. I didn't hold it for as long. But just to show you a guidance here, from that mark of when they got in at 259, we're now sitting at 231. So this is something that I actually wanted you guys to actually look at, being at the fact that these moves have been so drastic, and this is not the only one I'm going to show you. But they actually hit this from 259 and it's already at 231. So that strike is literally already in the money, and you literally had, I think they're worth about a grand at least at the bare minimum right now. So that's something to keep an eye on. What I like to do is usually go back to the unique flow, go back and look at all the previous unusual calls, unusual puts, see how they perform. And so the ones that just stood out to me, this is one that actually stood out because of the fact that I know that I sold early on it. So that's why I want to point it out, just not for myself, but also for you guys. All right. The GE one, I actually didn't look it up particularly. I know that it was 90 puts. So just touching bases because I know that Tatum just pointed that one out. So I'll just get into that one. That was actually a beautiful one because they hit 90 puts and it was pretty much right at the top here. Right around the mark. I want to say it was close enough to about 98 mark when they actually hit those 90 strike puts. And as you see, you had a little bit of a rising wedge, bear flag, however you want to call it, and it broke right down. And I sold that this morning. I could have held it for a little bit more, another dollar or two at the opening, but I didn't want to get caught in the bounce because it was a little bit far the money still at the time that I sold this morning. And so I took those profits. I literally snagged it. I didn't really care about the $2 drop. But that was just a beautiful one here today. Of course, I went back and I actually charted. I just didn't take the float pretty much blind. But as you see, it was pretty much a clear bear flag. Perfect breakdown. Beautiful gap down that we had this morning. Took my profits and I pretty much ran with it and I didn't look back. So this was another one. I didn't pull up the screenshot of it, but they did take 90 puts. If I'm not mistaken, they took it for the end of this week. Maybe Tatum can confirm that. But I believe they took it for the end of this week. So that was a beautiful one. But the other one that stood out to me was also Rivian. This is one that actually played for the upside. And as you saw, Rivian was actually green today. If I point this one out, and I think I can actually look at this one on a lower time frame actually real quick. Let me look at it probably on the 5 minute. And I hope I didn't lose that screenshot. Where'd it go? Did I lose it? Alright, no, I didn't lose it. It's alright. So looking at what they did here, and so this is another one that was pretty much just a quick flip basically. They ended up getting on Rivian. They picked this one up on the 10th. So looking at December 10th, they picked it up right before the gap up. That was a beautiful one right there. Right before the gap up, they got filled right around the mark of 111 that is. If you got in from 111, if you held that and you swung that position, you woke up the next morning and it literally opened up at a high of 121. So that's another one that was just a beautiful one. And despite the market volatility, it was actually still up yet again today. They did have the news, I believe it was about the Motor Trend Vehicle of the Year or some sort. So that was another one that was just a beautiful move right there. So I wanted to point that one out as well. So as you see, it's not just the downside that it's usually playing in the favor of, but also the upside. So this is a beautiful one. And then the last one that I actually just took a position in today was the ARC puts that we ended up having. If I actually look, and I believe I had this on a larger time frame, probably go to the daily. This is another one. If I blow the image up, because I didn't want to move the screen, they took these puts here today. They took it right around, I'll call it 3 o'clock, and they got in at 94.35. And so it did bounce just a bit, but it did end up having a nice little support level. And that's what I was actually charting. Like I said, you go and you look at the chart, you look to see exactly what they're particularly maybe looking at. So once we end up breaking the support here below 91.66, then that's when it's really going to start to pay. All right. So around that 91.66 level, once we break that support, it's likely going to be a nice flush right down below that 90 mark. And that's what I would anticipate that this buyer was actually thinking about. So I took a small position. I have about 3 contracts. If it ends up bouncing tomorrow morning, I may add to it. Of course, you still want to have a stop loss. So averaging down, it may be another contract or two, depending upon how much it ends up gapping up, if that be the case. But that's what I'll be looking at holding and swinging. I know that the GE one I did, I took literally when that one first came out, I took about 8% profit and I sold it. And then Black Mamba actually reminded me about it. And when I realized it didn't move as much, I ended up re-entering, and that's how I ended up cashing out on that one this morning. So they don't usually always pay at the same time. You always have to think about that. These are some usually particularly swing plays. So that's why during this kind of market volatility, you don't want to enter your own trades blindly, take just random alerts. But what I do find to be consistent is the unusual puts and unusual calls, especially during these kind of times. So that's what I wanted to point out to everyone. I think that's pretty much the best advice I can give you guys tonight as the week starts with this volatility. And that's what I wanted to point out. But other than that, let's hope for a bounce tomorrow. Let's see if the market wants to give us a bounce right before we go into the Feds here. They can give us a nice little gap up. I was hoping to see Microsoft actually hold up. If you probably saw me charting that wedge that we ended up having, it didn't hold so well. I believe I still have that wedge charted up as well. If I pull up chart right here, I probably deleted it more so. Looks like I may have deleted it. Yeah, I think I deleted the intraday one. If I go down to the 3 minute, I don't know why that extended. Tried that by accident. I was looking at this little falling wedge action here just to give you a heads up, and it was a little bit of just a quick scalp that I ended up having. You had a nice little falling wedge action right here, intraday, and this is what you probably saw me watching for most of the day. For that particularly, I didn't chase the downside. I should have chased Nvidia. That was actually a beautiful one if I chased that. But just watching this little falling wedge action, I saw it try to break to the upside, but then we ended up having a bigger head and shoulders type formation. You had this left shoulder, the massive unusual head, and a right shoulder which caused that flush down. So that's what I was looking at today. It ended up breaking down. It is what it is. I was actually having high hopes for it that this would actually get a nice continuation going into tomorrow. But market didn't want to comply. We saw a lot of names just flush. Tesla was down even about $10 after hours. So volatility still looks like it's pretty elevated, and that's why I wanted to point out the unusuals. So don't try to step into a knife. Pretty much, I would say, if the market does give you another downfall tomorrow, I would stick to wait for the rapids or the unusuals. I know that we had the rapids this morning. The Tesla one was pretty rough. You probably had to pretty much snake the chain on that one and get in on a wick down. We had the Facebook ones. That one actually had a little bit of a continuation into the morning hours. And then we also had an unusual one with a ticker that I'm not too familiar about, but I'm not certain if it ended up paying or not. That one was for, see if I actually found it. Okay, no, I take that back. It was just app. Oh, the Tina one, TNA. That was a bearish one. And then we had the Apple Rapids, of course, right at the get go, after off the gap up. So I did see actually a lot of buyers still stepping on Apple despite that little downfall that we had. It was down about $2 and change, but buyers were still stepping in. It looks like at this moment the move is done. They've broken down that parabolic curve, so it's likely going to see a little bit more downside here before we get a reversal. So just be cautious, trying to catch the knives all over the place, and that's why I say stick to the unusuals for right now until we get some more clarity after the Feds pretty much talk, and then we see what the market reaction is. All right. But other than that, I'm gonna leave you guys with that. I mean, again, I didn't go through really looking for support levels, resistance levels. We want to see the market pretty much calm down here, get a little bit more of a stability, see a nice gap up if we get any kind of movement towards the upside and continuation. Otherwise, if we start drilling, then the support levels are all pretty much going to be broken here. And it's likely that we may end up getting some more volatility. I would anticipate that this is pretty much pricing in whatever's going to be coming out of the Feds, but we'll see what it is the case. For right now, just kind of stay clear. I don't want anyone pretty much losing profits or rather losing any kind of percentage in their portfolio. So this is where I would say just stay cautious for right now. Keep the positions light for right now as well. All right. But I think that'll be all that I pretty much want to touch bases on. We'll pretty much end it early here tonight. We'll see what the market gives us. I'm just hoping for a little bit more of a stability tomorrow, more fluid movement, not just a meltdown like we had today, in which everything was pretty much just. If you ended up getting a bounce, it literally lasted about 2 seconds and you guys shut right back down. So we'll see what it does tomorrow. But other than that, we'll call it a night here, guys. You guys have a good night. Watch some football. And I'll see you guys on live again tomorrow morning then. All right, guys? You guys have a good night.